Welcome to the COOP for Rural Hospitals webinar series. This is webinar number 3, Identifying Essential Functions. In this webinar, we will review the process to identify your essential functions and their related supporting essential activities. Before we begin our webinar, let's review the components of the Rural Hospital COOP Toolkit. While this toolkit was designed specifically for rural hospitals, other hospitals or other healthcare organizations may find benefit from the elements in the toolkit. This toolkit has been specifically designed for rural hospitals and includes 6 components which you see listed on the graphic on the screen. The first component is a COOP plan completion guide, and the second component is a COOP plan template. These are designed to work together to help hospitals customize their COOP plan. The third component is a COOP tabletop exercise in a box that includes all the materials you would need to design and conduct a tabletop exercise at your hospital. The fourth component is a collection of resources related to COOP planning, specifically COOP planning industry standards and best practices. This curated list of resources may be helpful as you write or update your hospital's COOP plan. The fifth component is a frequently asked questions document to help you explain COOP planning to your peers and executive leaders. The sixth and final component of this toolkit is this series of webinars to help continuity planners complete or update their hospital's COOP plan. The webinars are focused on the first 2 components of the toolkit, the COOP completion guide and the COOP plan template. The completion guide has been designed with activities and explanations of how to write a COOP plan for your organization. As you complete the activities, you can move answers into the COOP template. The template can be edited or adjusted however you see fit to meet the needs of your organization. If you already have a COOP plan, you can use the completion guide to help augment or revise your current COOP plan. And now for webinar 3, Identifying Essential Functions. In this webinar, we will review the process to identify your essential functions. To follow along, please have the COOP completion guide and COOP plan template available. If your hospital already has a COOP plan, you can have that available as well. This is a roadmap graphic that describes the 4 phases of COOP planning, and each phase corresponds to a bend in the road. There is a red chess piece that will move with us as we progress through this roadmap and progress through the webinars. Step 1 in the COOP planning process is to prepare. Preparing includes building your COOP planning team and setting up your project management plan, as well as understanding the COOP planning elements and the regulatory environment. Webinars 1 and 2 focus on step 1. Step 2 in the COOP planning process is to write your COOP plan. Webinars 3, 4, and 5 guide you through writing your COOP plan and using the COOP completion guide and the COOP planning template provided in the toolkit. Step 3 is to train and exercise so your staff know how to activate the COOP when needed. This will be covered in webinar 6. And finally, step number 4 is to evaluate and improve your COOP plan. This will also be covered in webinar 6. We will refer to this roadmap graphic and the 4 steps of COOP throughout this webinar series. Here we see our roadmap again, and our red chess piece has moved to step 2, to COOP. In this webinar, we will focus on identifying your hospital's essential functions and their supporting essential activities. We will build on what we discussed in step 1, prepare. Again, please have the COOP completion guide, COOP plan template, and your current COOP plan, if you have one, available. If you want to follow along in real time, you can pause this webinar at any time. Because your COOP plan will be driven by your essential functions, it's important to consider what we learned in webinars 1 and 2, where you were preparing to COOP. After those webinars, you should have identified a COOP planning team, crafted a completion strategy, and decided on your document layout. It's okay if you haven't done those, but know this webinar builds on webinars 1 and 2. Also, there are no right or wrong answers for your essential functions. The process we will discuss today is one way for you to identify your essential functions. The important part is that you can explain your approach to any surveyor and build the rest of your COOP to support these functions. Finally, you may want to repeat the process in this webinar more than once. Large-scale essential functions, such as emergency services, may need more work to whittle them down to a more manageable scale. Since your COOP plan is based on identifying your essential functions, let's first define what essential functions are. Essential functions are activities that an organization determines cannot be deferred or paused during an emergency. The goal of a COOP plan is to make sure these functions are not paused or available within 12 hours of a continuity incident. Essential functions enable your organization to provide vital care services, maintain the safety of your patients, staff, and visitors, sustain your organization's financial viability, and might be required by law or statute. In this webinar, we will focus on a 4-step process to identify your organization's essential functions. The 4-step flowchart on the screen shows the process we will use. Step 1, conducting a business process analysis that results in potential essential functions. Step 2, using the essential functions decision tree to determine preliminary essential functions. Step 3, determining supporting essential activities to create draft essential functions. And finally, step 4, using the essential functions decision tree again to identify your final essential functions. Another way to look at this process is using the funnel approach as shown by the upside down triangle graphic on the screen. Not every function you do every day is essential. Using our process map, we can refine and eliminate some of the functions until we determine what are truly the essential functions. Here we see our 4-step process map again with a red arrow that will follow us along through each step. The red arrow points to step number 1. Let's begin with step 1 and conducting a business process analysis, or BPA. A BPA identifies the different functions and outputs of your organization or department. To begin, make a list of the functions or services or activities that your organization provides. To help with this, you can look at your organization's mission and vision statements. Consider things that your organization provides that are unique to the community, or think about the services that are critical for patient care. There is a table in your COOP plan completion guide and COOP plan template where you can document your results. Once you have this list, you can complete your BPA. For each item on your list, ask yourself 2 questions. How often does this need to happen? Daily, weekly, or monthly are common answers. Is there a safety impact to our patients, staff, or our space if this does not happen? We'll use food services as an example. How often does food service need to happen? Daily, and in fact several times a day. Is there a safety impact if food services does not happen? Yes, there's a safety impact to our patients. There is a table in your COOP completion guide and COOP plan template where you can document your results. As you go through your list and answer the questions for each item, we identify your potential essential functions, as noted by the red circle at the end of step 1 on our process map. As you look at your results, Notice those functions that must be performed daily. Also note the functions that are directly related to patient, staff, or space safety. These are the items you can focus on for the next steps. As we move on to step 2, you can see the red arrow follows us. For demonstration purposes, choose 2 or 3 potential essential functions from your list. We will work through step 2, the essential functions decision tree, with your selected functions. The essential functions decision tree is shown on the screen and also in your completion guide. This decision tree is comprised of 3 questions and will help us further narrow down our potential essential functions. For each potential essential function from above, work through the decision tree as you ask yourself 3 questions. Question 1, can another department perform this function? If the answer is yes, this is not an essential function. If the answer is no or maybe, move on to the next question. Question 2, can this function be paused without impacting patient, staff, or building safety? If the answer is yes, this is not an essential function. If the answer is no or maybe, move to the final question. Question 3, is this function critical to financial or operational capability? If the answer is no, this is not an essential function. If the answer is yes or maybe, this is a preliminary essential function. Since we used food services above, let's continue with that in our example. Question 1, can another department perform food services? Other departments could help with food service, but we probably need some food service expertise to perform this function. So I will say this is a maybe answer. So we will move on to question 2. Question 2, can this function be paused without impacting patient, staff, or building safety? No, we cannot pause food service. So we move to question 3. Question 3, is this function critical to financial or operational capabilities? Yes, food service is critical to our operational capability. This means that food service is a preliminary essential function. You can use this decision tree for every potential essential function from the step above. As you work through this, not all of your potential essential functions will become preliminary essential functions. Now that you have worked through step 2 and the decision tree, you have a list of preliminary essential functions, as seen in the red circle on the screen. Let's move on to step 3, supporting essential activities. We see our process map again, and our red arrow has moved to step 3, which is identifying supporting essential activities. Supporting essential activities are the subtasks that are necessary to complete an essential function. Let's use the graphic of a plant on the screen as an example. If your essential functions are above ground and the leaves of the plant, your supporting essential activities are the roots of the plant. They are necessary for the plant to thrive. Let's continue with our food service example from above. I have identified 4 supporting essential activities for food service: ordering food, preparing food, serving food, and cleaning up in this example. Food service personnel may have additional activities to add. There is a table in your COOP completion guide and COOP plan template where you can document supporting essential activities for each of your preliminary essential functions. We have now worked through step 3 and our supporting essential activities. Our supporting essential activities are now our draft essential functions, as shown by the red circle on the screen. Let's move to step 4 and the essential functions decision tree. We are now on to step 4, as shown with our red arrow, and we will use our essential functions decision tree again. The decision tree shown on this slide is exactly the same as step 2. For each of our supporting essential activities from above, we will ask ourselves the same 3 questions. Let's continue with our food service example. We identified 4 supporting essential activities for food service: ordering food, preparing food, serving food, and cleaning up. Let's use the decision tree for each one. First, ordering food. Question number 1, can another department perform this function or provide this service? I would say yes. With some training, another department could order food. So ordering food is not an essential function. Next, preparing food. Question number 1, can another department perform this function? I would say no. Preparing food in a hospital kitchen takes some specific skill that only food service has. So we move on to question number 2. Can this function or service be paused without impacting patient, staff, or building safety? I would say no. We move on to question 3. Is this function or service critical to the financial or operational capabilities? Yes. Preparing food is critical to our operational capability and is an essential function. Next, serving food. Question number 1, can another department perform this function? Yes, we could use other hospital personnel to serve food, so this is not an essential function. Finally, cleaning up. Question number 1, can another department perform this function? Yes, we could use other hospital personnel to help clean up after meal service, so this is not an essential function. This is where we end our 4-step process for identifying essential functions. We have conducted a BPA, we have used the essential functions decision tree, we identified supporting essential activities, and we use the essential functions decision tree again to determine our final essential functions. Here is the funnel approach again, and I hope you see from this process how we started with a lot of potential essential functions, and through several rounds of analysis have landed on our final essential functions. Now that you have identified your essential functions, you can add those to your COOP plan. There is an essential functions section in the COOP plan template for your essential functions, or you can add them to your existing plan. To identify supporting essential activities for those essential functions, you can repeat the process we discussed in step 3 of our process map. Add those results into your COOP plan as well. That brings us to the end of webinar 3, identifying essential functions. In the next webinar, we will continue in step 2 to COOP and look at vital records, IT, human resources, and communications for our identified essential functions. This webinar was prepared and recorded by All Clear Emergency Management Group under contract with the Minnesota Department of Health Emergency Preparedness and Response Division. If you have any questions, please see their website at www.health.state.mn.us/about/org/EPR.